Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to cover the lunar eclipse that's coming up in the next few days, or chandra grahan, as it's known as in Sanskrit. This is happening 17th September 2024. Most places. I think it's pretty close to midnight, though, so it might be September 18th, depending on where you are. This talk is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so ancient Indian astrology. And it seemed like the theme for this moment in time is all that glitters, and that comes from the kind of phrase or expression you might have heard that all that glitters is not gold. Okay, so let's get into it. Note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only. It should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. Then you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. Okay, so if you're new to Vedic astrology, also known as Jyotish in Sanskrit, or my videos, all of my teaching videos on the subject are my concept playlists, so they can be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. And all of my videos I organize into different playlists so that they're easy to find. So you can look up the different playlists to see if there's a topic area you're interested in learning about more or in a deeper way. So playlists like planets or grahas, planets or bhavas, yogas are planetary combinations. So you can check out, things are organized that way. And if you like to learn astrology by, looking at famous birth charts, I've analyzed a lot on this channel, and I created a birth chart archive list 2024 video where I list all the famous birth charts I've analyzed, famous people, places, moments, and time. And the video you can find them in, because most of my videos have famous birth charts actually, but you wouldn't know from the title. Like my monthly videos, I usually analyze 3 famous birth charts, but you wouldn't know from the title. So yeah, the video to help you find, different people or places, moments in time that you might be interested in learning about the astrology of. So helpful videos to watch with this one because it's mostly interpretation talk, and I incorporate a lot of different concepts. So again, we're talking about mostly a lunar eclipse this time. So I have a video on lunar solar eclipses or chandra surya grahan, where I go through the, astronomy, as well as the general considerations and thoughts from a Vedic astrology perspective on eclipses. And then I just recently, like a week or so ago, published a new one. That's the auspicious timing of eclipses or grahan muhurta. So eclipses are considered generally to be not a great time to start auspicious things, big life events that you want to, be fruitful and happy and consistent in your life. But I go through all the different rules and ways of figuring the exact timing of that because there are different activities as well that people observe during the time of the eclipse. Okay. Also North, South, and East Indian style charts. I cover Western style charts in that video as well. Introduction to navigating a birth chart. And Lugna, also known as the ascendant, rising sign, or first house. It's always very important. That's why I always start with the Lugna because it essentially sets the tone for the rest of the chart. Introduction to the constellations and rashis, constellation and rashi categories. Planetary aspects, natural, benefic, and malefic planets or grahas. Chidra grahas are planets of vulnerability. Planetary exaltation, debilitation, or uccha nicca. Swagrahas are planets in their own sign or star. Planet retrogression or vakri. Nakshatras are lunar mansions. Parivartana yoga, exchange of houses. Kala sarpa yoga, the ambition combination. Solar yogas, veshi, vashi, and ubayachari. Lunar yogas, sunafa, anapha, duradara, and kimadruma. So, a lot to learn, but when you learn it, it gives a lot back to you. So, let's get started. All right, so this is the chart for the lunar eclipse or chandra grahan that's happening this September 2024. In my neck of the woods, Eastern Standard Time, it's going to be on September 17th, but you can see it's pretty close to midnight here. Time, Eastern Standard Time of the eclipse is 22:33 p.m. So about 10:30 p.m. Okay, so the day lord for this moment in time is Mars, and the Hora lord or hour lord is Sun. So already we're getting information here. what are we getting? Well, Mars and Sun are the two fire planets. So Pitta planets in Ayurveda, if you do traditional Indian medicine. So there's a lot of fire here, a lot of transformation activity, right? Because fire transforms things, like it'll take a piece of wood and turn it into ash, that sort of thing, or take your raw food and turn it into cooked food. The other thing is that Mars and Sun are the two leadership planets. So, we're seeing leadership here and fire transformation here. The other thing is I put explosion, which isn't necessarily Mars or Sun, but the thing is, if you see Mars up in the second house here, it's in a red square or rectangle. Mars is at 13 degrees 35 minutes at this moment in time, and it aspects into Virgo, which is 4 houses away. Now, if you notice, in that house, we have the Sun, 1 degree 28 minutes, so it's basically the first degree. So Sun is Sunday, or it means it's the first or last degree of a sign, which makes the planet and all the things it symbolizes unstable, because you're switching elements when you change signs. So we're going from Leo. Sun is going from Leo, or a fire sign, to Virgo, which is an earth sign. Okay, then we have K2 at 12 degrees 50 minutes. I have Venus here, 29 degrees and 42 minutes. So Venus is also Sunday, also unstable, because it's just about to leave Virgo, or an earth sign, and move into, Libra, which is a air sign. Even though Venus will be stronger once it stabilizes in once it stabilizes in Libra, it'll be in its own sign. But if you notice the degrees here, Mars is at 13 degrees 35 minutes, and K2 is at 12 degrees 50 minutes. So essentially, Mars has a direct aspect on K2. That's where this explosion energy comes from. Okay, so Mars is fiery and erratic. It's a rebellious planet. When it's out of control. Whenever there's too much pitta from an Ayurvedic standpoint, it's like it can be irritated, angry, violent even. And we have the other pitta planets. So we have two pitta planets here, two fire planets, Mars and Sun. But Mars is at the same degree as K2. And K2 is the south node of the moon. And K2 is like Mars, also rebellious and fiery and erratic, but even more so. Okay. So it's almost like, these are, of the 9 classic Jyotish planets, these are the 3 that are considered the most fiery, or the only ones that have fire in them, and they're all together in the same house. So that alone gives me the indication here that there's going to be some kind of explosion. Now, this could be something very tangible, because we are in an earth sign here, a Virgo. Okay. And as we'll talk about, there are different things going on. Like, it could be something very mundane. It can be something very small. Like, for some reason, I woke up one day this morning, or not this morning, but this week, and just felt like that was the day that I was supposed to take, like, my electronic things that weren't working anymore. Like, my town has a recycling center. I was like, and they've been, I've been collecting them for, I don't know how long, a year or two or whatever. And I was like, you know what? I think now's the time to go and take them there. And I did that. So that's a kind of, you know, it's a kind of explosion or transformation energy of those things. I don't know what they do with them. I don't know if they take them apart or repurpose them, or I don't know what they do, melt them down. I don't know. But also, this is all happening in Virgo, an earth sign, but also a dual earth sign, Dvasvabhava sign. So there's two, a dual sign will have like contrasting energy to it, or at least two different, like, since it's an earth sign, there you would assume that there's like two things here. So, for example, recycling my electronics, my old electronics that aren't, functional anymore, it's like taking them from one direction and sending them in another direction, basically. Also, if you saw my last monthly video, one of the moments in time that I looked at was actually the attack, a September 11th attack of the Twin Towers in New York. And the Lugna, the rising sign for that chart, was a Virgo, which seems kind of odd, because Virgo's generally has this notion of being very like tidy or whatever. But, when we're talking again about a dual earth sign, the twin towers, like the two physical pieces, skyscrapers, two physical things. Okay. And then also in that monthly video, I also did like the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in southern Italy. And it also had this kind of Mars K2 mix there. So you can see in both. So again, whenever we have this like Mars and K2 combination, either right in the same sign or directly opposing each other or like this, I would assume that there's going to be some kind of very strong destructive energy. Okay. Now, on what level? It's going to be different everywhere and for everybody, depending on birth charts. Okay. So, not to alarm anybody, but that's what we're talking about here with this kind of energy. Okay. The other thing is another example. Is that last October, I believe it was when Mars was crossing K2. That's when Israel got attacked. And we've been dealing with that fallout since then, so almost a year now, right? So there's a lot of examples of how. Oh, and also when the COVID pandemic broke out, Mars was crossing K2 in Sagittarius. So again, some kind of explosion is going on here. Internally, externally, maybe both, because again, it's in a dual. This explosion that's happening is in a dual Earth sign. Okay, now the Dasha period, or the planetary period, is Jupiter, Rahu, Mercury. Okay, so what do we get from that? Well, Jupiter and Mercury are the two communication planets. They're also the two education planets. And Rahu is the north node of the moon, and it indicates that things that are hidden, unexpected, also ambition as well. So I could see from this that there might be some unusual, news about ambition of some kind. Okay? Now the Dasha period is going to switch from Jupiter, Rahu, Mercury to Jupiter, Rahu, Jupiter, November 26th of this year. And so with that, there might be a loss of people or public, because Jupiter represents people. It could also be like a loss of like justice or law, changes there, unexpected things going on with justice and law. Okay. Then we have Jupiter, then it's shifting to Jupiter, Rahu, Saturn. So we're getting another new planet in the mix, Dasha mix, March 24th, 2025. And so Saturn is a planet of obstacles, delays, losses can be. So what I was saying here is that this could be like a loss of home or partners or ideas, because of where Jupiter and Saturn are sitting and what they're aspecting. Okay. Now this 24th March time also seems to correlate with when Saturn, because you can see Saturn is in Aquarius, its own sign right now. It's also retrograde, you know that because it has a little line under it. So Saturn is super strong right now, and Saturn is super destructive, and that's part of what's going on here. Even though Saturn is, luckily, thank God, not in the middle of this whole eclipse thing going on, because it would be much worse for sure. But at the end of March, Saturn is finally shifting signs out of Aquarius. Yeah, so. Okay, so the Lugna Nakshatra, the Lugna again is a rising sign, first house, ascendant, all different names for the same thing. I use North Indian style charts in my work. This is North Indian style chart that you see. On the top, diamond in the middle there. There's a little 2 on the bottom corner. That top diamond is the ascendant or rising sign, first house, or Lugna. Okay. The second, the little 2 in the corner, bottom corner there, the 2 represents the second constellation of the zodiac, or Taurus, or Vrishaba in Sanskrit. So this is a Taurus rising chart for this moment in time. The nakshatra is our lunar mansion, so there are 27 nakshatras. Every night the moon travels through another one of these nakshatras. They all have different energies. And so after the moon goes through 27 of these nakshatras, you get a lunar month. Now the Lugna nakshatra here is Rohini. Rohini, in contrast to a lot of this chart, is considered to be like the nakshatras that's the most attractive, the most fertile, the most um, luscious. I always think of like the goddess Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth and abundance, when I think of Rohini. Okay, so we've got that, and that's permeating this whole chart. However, then we get into the moon nakshatra. The moon is in a nakshatra of Purva Bhadrapada. Purva Bhadrapada is symbolized by the front legs of a funeral pyre. So, and the mind represents things like the intuition, the public emotions, the intuitive mind, hospitality. And so all of those things you can just kind of imagine being on a funeral pyre. So again, more destructive, chaotic, fiery, combustive energy here. Okay. The other thing is the moon you see is in the first degree in 28 minutes of the sign. It says moon is also Sunday. So we've got sun, Venus, moon, all Sunday here. When I see a chart that has, 3, 4 or more planets that are Sunday, that in itself, regardless of everything else, in addition to everything else maybe, brings instability. Because that means that 3 out of 9 planets are shifting. Energies, yeah. So Moon and Purva Bhadrapada, so this could be the end of ideas and people, potentially. Partly because the moon is in the 11th house related to clubs, groups, and societies, and moon represents people. The other thing is that moon is with Rahu, so there's some ambition here. But the moon is being aspected by the sun, by the Sunday, the sun, unstable Venus, and we have a parivartana yoga exchange of houses between Mercury and the sun. So if you swap those two in your mind, where you see that little double-sided green arrow, that means that Mercury is also aspecting the moon. So this is going to be, a lot, frankly, because Mercury is debilitated in Pisces, where the moon is. Venus is exalted in the Pisces, where the moon is. Sun is kind of neutral or a little bit, supported because Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is the friend for the sun. But this is a lot of, so this combustion, explosive energy that's happening in the 5th house, and the 5th house can represent things like the stage, because the 5th house in the natural zodiac is ruled by Leo, and Leo represents a stage. The 5th house also represents children. It also represents advising and counseling and teaching. Okay. So hopefully this doesn't, I'm hoping, I always love it when I'm wrong about bad news, but sometimes you kind of see, you see it coming with these charts. Hopefully this doesn't mean that there's going to be some outbreak or physical explosion involving, schools and teachers and kids. I'm really hoping that's not true. But, it could be mine. Like I said, I took my electronics to the recycling center. Like another example, I know somebody who has a Gemini rising chart, and so this Virgo is in their 4th house of home, and they are actually in the middle of getting divorced, and the house is for sale, and they're closing on the house this week, actually. And so this eclipse stuff is happening in their 4th house of home. So the house is gone, but they're also selling it, and then they're going to take the profits and split it into 2. There you go. So, again, depending on where, so it could be something like that, which, maybe they're happy, like, maybe they're happy to be getting divorced. I don't really know. But just to give you some different examples of what this kind of energy can create on a small scale or large scale. And again, everybody's chart is going to be different in terms of what, actually comes through. The other thing is that you have to consider, it's not just individuals' birth charts, that which will help decide, what's actually going to come, and what, you got to see like what planet they're running and the condition of the planets and the placement of the planets. But the other thing is that, they're also subject to the karma or the birth chart of the place that they live. So people in the United States are going to have a different karma, because of the birth chart of the United States versus people who live in wherever, Germany, Iceland, Australia, whatever. So there are all these different layers, right? Okay. So some context here is that even though there's a parivartana between Mercury and Sun, it actually, frankly, helps a bit, because when Mercury's in its own sign and Sun is in its own sign, that means that those 2 planets are going to protect the houses. So in this chart, it's going to be the Sun is going to protect the 4th house of home, And Mercury is going to protect the fifth house of counseling, for example. However, this Mercury in its own house and Sun in its own house, so the Swa Mercury, Swa Sun, will not necessarily protect the people associated with those houses. Okay, so mostly what we're looking at here is some sort of loss of people. Now, it doesn't have to be, literal. It could be something like, for example, when I've had sort of like an eclipse like this happen in my fifth house of advisors, like I've had different advisors of different kinds, and like it might be that around the time of the eclipse, I'm talking with the advisor and like, oh, by the way, I'm retiring next month. So, if there's anything we need to do to wrap up before I transition out of here, let me know. So it's not always like a, knockdown, blowout fight. Sometimes it will be, but it can just be like, somebody that you depended on for a while is, moving on, somewhere else. Okay. The thing is that Mercury is entering Virgo or Kanya September 23rd. So we'll lose some protection around the Leo placement here. However, it also might help cool things down because when we have Sun in its own sign and we have that opposed to Saturn, retrograde in its own sign, Sun represents like things like the king, president, authority, government, that sort of thing. And Saturn represents bureaucracy. It represents, the people, proletariat, that sort of thing. And so I've been talking about this, for a while, probably a good month or so, is that when you have this opposition of a strong Sun with a strong Saturn, you often get strikes. So last year, when Sun was in Leo and Saturn was here in the United States, we had strikes in Hollywood, like actor strike and a writer strike, and the auto workers went on strike. And actually, women in Iceland went on strike for a day. This year, we've had strikes as well. So we actually had a hotel strike just recently. I think it was last week. People of Israel went on strike to protest their government's, lack of intervention regarding hostages kept um, uh, by Palestine or other opposing forces. And then just yesterday or today, I saw in the news that Boeing Airlines or the aircraft makers, their people voted to strike. So we have a lot of strikes here. But again, it's because you have these two opposing energies head to head. So Sun is moving out of here. You'll still get a bit of the Sun in its own sign until was it September 23rd? So we've got another week or so, week and a half, 10 days after um, the eclipse, the lunar eclipse. Okay. The other thing that happens once Mercury goes into its own sign, it's also like we're going to lose the sort of power struggle, okay, of the Sun in its own sign versus Saturn in its own sign. However, things are going to get kind of wild after that because once Mercury goes into its own sign of Virgo, because K2 will be in a sign with its dispositor, that means you're going to get aspects, and you can see the dotted gray lines coming from the fifth house. That's for K2. So once Mercury moves into Virgo, and that's going to be on September 23rd, you're going to get K2 energy in the other Earth houses or the other Earth constellations. So you're going to get K2 energy on this Lugna of Taurus. You're also going to get K2 energy on Capricorn, which is the ninth house in this chart. Okay, and again, K2 is like Mars, but more erratic, more unpredictable, more hidden, more unexpected. So it could, again, the eclipses are always a bit of a wild time because they're essentially created because of Rahu and Ketu, and they both have hidden, unexpected energy. The only thing you can really anticipate with eclipses is that expect the unexpected. Now, again, I always mentioned the unexpected things that happen are not always necessarily bad. Sometimes it can be like a surprise, like maybe a friend shows up, that you haven't seen in a while. You're like, oh, so happy to see them, or I've heard of people like, just unexpectedly get, proposed and decide that they're going to get married. And so it can be all kinds of stuff that happens. Okay, both good and bad, but just something that's you're not necessarily anticipating. So again, K2 when it goes 5 and 9, aspects 5 and 9 away, things are going to get a little bit more wild and obscure, but also I would say spiritual as well. Okay, why spiritual? Well, for two reasons. One, when Mercury's in its own sign, whether it's Gemini or Virgo, and here it's going to be Virgo, I often find at that time, because Mercury represents the analytical mind, the logical mind, that sort of thing. When I see Mercury in its own sign, I typically find people who are interested in meditation and Buddhism. So, like these, mindfulness practices. Actually, one of the charts I analyzed, it's in the list in that video, is the Dalai Lama, and he has Mercury in its own sign. So he's a pretty good example. So that's one reason. The other reason is that K2 is aspecting here in this chart, especially for a Taurus rising, is aspecting Jupiter. Jupiter is a very spiritual planet. I mean, it's literally represents a guru, which can be a teacher of any kind, but especially a spiritual teacher, somebody who brings light to darkness. Whether it's through teaching you something more tangible, like how to count or spell, or somebody who teaches you literature or what have you. Okay. And Jupiter as an element in a chart represents ether. So it's a very intangible, ethereal type energy, Jupiter is. K2, even though K2 often gets a bad rap, K2 actually, when it's in its best, its highest, best form, can represent like spiritual, like detachment, like being above the fray, in this world, but not of it type energy. So we're going to get K2 energy on Jupiter. Okay. And even though this is a material sign that Jupiter is in Taurus, because usually Taurus is very much like a very materialistic, because it represents the natural second house of assets and family, and again things you usually can touch, your furniture, your car, your assets, and stuff like that. And so what I was seeing here, and as we keep talking, and that's why the theme of the month is, or theme of this moment is all that glitters, because it seems like we're starting out here with a very kind of material focus that literally might blow up or something close to it. Something shifts pretty dramatically and unexpectedly. And then what's left is, and the directive is to focus on the spiritual. That maybe all the attention and focus on the material things was actually a distraction from the things that are truly valuable and truly everlasting. Because otherwise we're just grasping, things. I mean, stuff comes and goes, right? I mean, houses come and go, and cars come and go, land, property, jobs, even people. Not, I mean, but that's the thing is sometimes when people pass on, they can become a spirit guide for you. And so, spiritually they're always there, but maybe not, they're not in their body anymore. Okay. So that's a lot to begin with to set the tone, but let's go through house by house and see what else we see here. Okay, so the Lugna is, again, Taurus or Vrishabha. It's a fixed earth sign, Ster Prithvi, so solid earth. However, Jupiter, this very spiritual planet, is in Mrigashirsha nakshatra. Mrigashirsha is symbolized by a deer's head. And again, a deer in many cultures around the world, in literature, you often see a deer going through the forest, and it's this kind of seeking energy. It's like the deer represents like, the person or the soul seeking, a path forward through the unknown, through the darkness, the dark forest and stuff like that. And Jupiter represents things like justice, education, teaching, spirit, people, like literally human beings. So we have the seeking energy of justice, education, teachers, students, spirit, people going on here. Okay. Now the Lugnatia of the chart, the Lugnatia is the ruling planet. The ruling planet of Taurus is Venus. Venus is this debilitated, so Venus is in Virgo is debilitated. It's Sundhi, so in the last degree of the sign, unstable in two ways. Venus is in the nakshatra of Chitra. Chitra is symbolized by gemstones, so there's a lot of kind of architecture, structure, energy associated with Chitra. Now, Venus is in the 5th house now, but you can see it's slipping into the 6th house, so it's kind of like it's moving from a dharmasthana, which is a house of duty, to an artisthana, or a material house. Right. So that, again, there's a shift here going on of, what's the primary motivation. Okay. Then it's conjoined with Ketu and Hasta. Hasta nakshatra is symbolized by hand. So again, with this Ketu energy, you never quite know what it's going to do. Plus, it's in a dual earth sign. So Ketu can be like suddenly grabbing something or suddenly letting something go. It's like the sorting. What I'm seeing here is like the sorting energy, especially with these fire planets, Mars and Sun involved here too. Okay. So it's like suddenly grabbing, suddenly releasing stuff. The Sunday sun as well. Sun is an Uttar Falguni nakshatra. Uttar Falguni is symbolized by like a hammock or a marital bed, but which symbolizes, indicates things like the finer things of life and enjoyment, socializing, like a very lovely, kind of a nakshatra. But with Uttar Falguni, you also have this notion of enjoyment with a purpose. Okay. Then it's aspected by Mars. So again, the other fire planet. Mars is an Ardra nakshatra. Ardra is symbolized by a drop of water. That drop of water can come from a storm cloud, so you can see like, electrical storm, lightning, and stuff like that. But it can also, that drop of water can be symbolic of a teardrop, so there can be sadness associated with Ardra as well. Okay, and Jupiter, so almost every planet is, we've got almost every planet involved in this 5th house except for Saturn. Thank God. Okay, because Saturn would just make this a complete mess. More than it is. Okay. So we also have Jupiter aspecting here, and you have a Sunday eclipsed moon aspecting here, and Mercury. So this is also, what I'm seeing is, again, we have some protection for inanimate things because Mercury is in parivartana with Sun. But you have the 2 emotional planets, Venus and Moon. They're both Sunday, and Venus is debilitated. There's a lot of emotional instability here. You also have the 2 mind planets here, Mercury and Moon. Okay, Moon is Sunday, as I mentioned, but this is the thing: Saturn is essentially affecting both Mercury and the Moon. So you can see Mercury I have in this green box. You can see the degrees here for Mercury are 20 degrees 34 minutes. And if you look at Saturn, it's kind of covered up, but if you look closely, Saturn's at 21 degrees 4 minutes. So Mercury and Saturn are also directly opposing each other. And not only that, but the moon. So when you have Saturn before the constellation of the moon, in the constellation of the moon, or after the constellation of the moon, that's in a 7.5-year period because Saturn takes 2.5 years per sign to shift through. That's a 7.5-year period called Sadhisati. Sadhisati is the only, I think, truly common things you can say about Sadhisati is a lot of people are afraid of Sadhisati, and partly that's because often people will lose a very important support system they've had in their life for a long time. So a lot of mental instability here because Saturn, again, is affecting both Mercury and Moon. Indirectly, again, luckily Saturn isn't on all these planets, but it's still on enough. You've got the 2 leadership planets. You've got the 2 emotional planets. Luckily you do have the 2 advising planets. Venus is the worldly advisor, Jupiter is the spiritual advisor, but the thing is that, again, Venus is not very stable or strong. Somewhat luckily, you have Jupiter aspecting not only Venus, but Venus, but the sign that Venus owns is Taurus. So Jupiter is going to help bring this up. And I think the way it's going to help bring things up is to spiritualize this whole experience, whatever's going down here. Okay. Okay, so what are we seeing here? Oh, and I didn't mention Mercury's in Purva Falguni. So Purva Falguni is also symbolized by a hammock. But it's just enjoyment and socializing and the finer things of life. There's no real purpose to it. It's just fun. It might be even considered frivolous, but because you have this massive Saturn, which is a planet that represents obstacles, delays, endings, anxiety, depression, skepticism, doubts, not very great things typically. On Mercury, this is like an end of good times, an end of fun, and then ending the party, essentially, is what I'm saying here, okay? In addition, there can be an end of different relationships, as I mentioned, with all that's going on in the fifth house. And there's, again, a relationship between the fifth and the fourth because of the parivartana. So, we could be talking about children, teachers, because of Jupiter, advisors, because of Jupiter, Venus, loved ones because of Venus. But there's a sudden shift involving acute issues or enemies. The reason why is that this destabilized, Sunday debilitated Venus is the lord of the sixth house of enemies and acute issues. Okay. So you're bringing, essentially, the Venus is bringing sixth house issues, energy into the fifth house. Okay. Fire, violence, explosion. It could involve the arts, like because Venus and Moon are there, two artistic planets. What else do we have going on here? We have women potentially, because Venus and Moon are the two planets representing women. What else? It could be, again, leadership here because Mars and Sun, the two leadership planets, are involved. Stage, division, or split. So, yeah, I mean, in some ways, unfortunately, in some ways, this chart was reminding me. I did an analysis of the bombing that happened in Moscow a few months back, where there was a concert hall that was bombed and there was an explosion that happened. And there was this kind of energy happening on the 511 axis. So again, hopefully nothing like that happens, knock on wood. But, maybe somewhere in the world it might happen. Okay. But you can see there's a lot going on. But again, most of what's the real loss here potentially is of people. And again, not like, literal death, but it could just be like somebody moves on in their life, that you're used to having in your life. Now, there are a bunch of yogas here. So there's a pravraja yoga. That's three planets in the fifth house: Sun, Ketu, Venus. That's a pravraja yoga. That's a focus, life focus yoga. There's a subhavashi solar yoga because of Mercury and the 12th house from the Sun. That's going to make this bit of a famous or notorious time, I would say. So, something big, again, might be going down here. There's an anapha lunar yoga as well because of Saturn's placement, 12th house from the moon. That's going to bring some support, but maybe support. In some ways, it could be a little bit negative support because Saturn's a natural malefic and it's so strong. But there's still strength there. So, the Kala Sarpa yoga, which is breaking, because Saturn, Moon, and Venus, so it's kind of the end of ambition in some ways. There's also a parivartana yoga I mentioned, an exchange of houses between Mercury and Sun. There's also a Saraswati yoga. So Saraswati yoga involves education, but also the arts as well. So again, you're getting a lot of artistic energy here. Yeah. Okay. So all these yogas together: ambition, focus, renown, authority, and news. So again, that's what we can kind of conjure up that's coming. And I mentioned the Sati, Saturn being in the house before the moon, so an end of a major support system. If we look at chidra grahas, so planets of vulnerability, Venus is a double chidra graha. Sun is as well, and Mercury is as well. And again, we have Venus, Sun, and Mercury all in the fifth house, and they're all going to be aspecting the 11th house. So, Sun again represents like an authority. Mercury represents friends. Venus represents loved ones. So again, unfortunately, I think the emphasis, with these eclipses coming up, especially this first one here, is going to involve people, also business communication for Mercury and leadership. Okay. I also listed here the yogi, aviyogi, and duplicate yogis, which are planets that represent like wealth or dearth. Saturn's a yogi, so that can indicate wealth. The aviyogi is moon, which can indicate dearth, and the duplicate yogi is Mars. So this massive Saturn, you can see that something going on in the 10th house, which is like fame, potentially authority, 9 to 5 activities. Potentially there's a lot of money involved there. And Saturn is the lord of the 9th house as well, which is can be father, can be authority, also can be government. Okay. Then the Aviyogi is the moon. The moon is in the 11th house of income, so there might be some loss of income here, potentially. Then the duplicate yogi, Mars, is in the 2nd house of assets. So I do feel like there's some, monetary shifting going on here as well. And I mentioned this Saturn shifts at the end of March when, again, the Shah period, the planetary period, is going to shift. So I got this far, and then I guess, the intuition was starting to perk up. And I was looking for a few days for some chart that was like a Taurus rising, like maybe a famous person or moment in time. And I was looking for like 2 or 3 days, and I couldn't find one that really seemed to fit or felt right. So I was just like, okay, well, I guess I'll just do like my normal, new moon, full moon video type thing and see. I guess that's maybe all I'm supposed to do. Then my intuition kind of perked up, and I remembered that New York City, actually, I did an analysis of New York City, or New Amsterdam as it was first called, and that has a sun rising chart that's Taurus. Now, it just so happened, so this is how the Jyotir video works. It seems to work for me, at least. So the Jyotir video, if you're not familiar, is considered to be like the kind of spirit of Jyotish, And so I was like, okay, well, maybe, I thought, well, I can't seem to find a good chart or the right chart that seems right, so I guess I'll just skip it. So what happened is, while I was busy researching stuff, some news came out. So the news is that, actually yesterday, um, the New York City Police Department's police commissioner resigned. So he's like the head honcho for the New York City Police Department. The New York City Police Department is the largest police department in the United States. I was looking it up. It's like apparently there are 34,000 police officers, and it's the oldest one in the United States. So this is a big deal. Okay. So why did he resign? Well, apparently there's some federal investigation going on. There are no formal charges yet, but this is a story. So when I tell you the story, you're gonna like probably laugh like I did because of this chart, okay? And the things we've talked about so far. So there's a federal investigation, and apparently his home was raided, I think, and his phone was confiscated. The reason being is that he is a twin. Okay. So he's got a double, like we were talking about, with this like double energy going on with, this dual Jupiter in the Lagna, and then we have Mercury, a dual planet, going into and doing an exchange into its own sign, which is a dual Earth sign, where a lot of this is going on. Because Virgo with the Sun, KT, Venus is a dual Earth sign, and then the Rahu Moon with all the other planets aspect there is a dual water sign. So even though we started off saying this is a fixed Earth sign, there's a lot of duality here. It's almost like the mirage is that there's some kind of fixed, steady nature here, when underneath there's a double thing. So this police commissioner has a twin brother, okay, and so and the police commissioner apparently served in the NYPD for 30 years. Now that's also interesting, because 30 years, Saturn takes almost 30 years to go through the whole zodiac. So whenever the police commissioner started in the New York Police Department, Saturn was probably in pretty close to where it is now. So basically, there's a Saturn return for him. Okay. And he served as police commissioner for like 14 months. And apparently, 13 out of 14 months, like crime reduced quite a bit. So at least, by what that measure, he did a pretty good job, okay, in this position. Now, what happened with the twin brother? So apparently the twin brother, there's been no formal charge yet, but this is just what I was reading. I mean, it was like pretty amazing. This is like movie scripts type stuff. Okay, so the twin brother apparently is a possible fixer for nightclubs. So fixer meaning like informally smoothing things over between whatever potential rowdy or potentially illegal activity, I guess, could be going on in a nightclub. And again, nightclubs is totally 11th house, okay, where we're looking, okay? Clubs, group societies, enjoyment. It's 11th house is a Kamasthana, a house of enjoyment. Yeah. So, so the brother might be kind of like smoothing things over, greasing palms or something like that between nightclubs and the police. And, again, I don't know if the police commissioner knows or doesn't know or involved or not involved. But anyway, there's a whole big federal investigation going on. Okay. So this possible, so again, if we look at this, so 30 years of service, Saturn, twin brother, Mercury, possible fixer for nightclubs. That's 511 axis there, especially, and with the commissioner announcing his resignation, that's this releasing of authority or explosion of authority in a very public way on a public stage. Okay, so again, there's no formal charges, but that's just like the little bit you're getting in the news so far, because this is going to like blow up, and it's blowing up now. Um, the other thing, okay, so that's so if you take this storyline of this New York police commissioner, this chart works pretty well. Okay. So I'm going to try not to focus on that, but it's almost like once you see it, like you kind of get it stuck in your head. So I'll try to keep it, more general than that. But already, I mean, I just stopped there and I was like, wow, look at all this. That's amazing. The other thing to know, I mean, we're talking about a federal investigation here for New York Police Department, the commissioner there. If you turn this chart upside down and you make it a Scorpio rising chart, the U.S. national chart is a Scorpio rising chart. So if you flip this upside down, you still have these eclipses happening on the 511 axis, just, upside down, reversed. So it's almost like a mirror reflection, the US national chart and the New York City chart here. Either way, you're going to get all this, dynamic action happening in the 5th house and 11th house of public stage advisement. Like they're losing an advisor here. With this Mars Sun K2 mix, there's separation, physical separation of the police commissioner and the department that he's been serving for 30 years. Yeah. Okay. So if you want to look at that New Amsterdam video, that's in my monthly May 2024 video that just came out a few months ago. And then the US bird chart, that's in the May 2022 video. So a couple years ago, I looked at that. Yeah. So anyway, just to give you again more concrete examples of how this energy can be playing out and how it's seems to be currently playing out for New York City. Okay, what else do we have? Okay, so if we look at the other houses, the second house lord is Mercury, again in Purva Bhadrapada. There's an exact mutual aspect with retrograde Saturn and Purva Bhadrapada. This Saturn is just going to squash this Mercury here. And then Mars is there in Ardra. So unpleasant. The second house is like speech. So unpleasant, angry, sad speech. Maybe hasty, sudden, unexpected, forced action. Mars can also represent, military. So end of military authority. This is like a pretty sudden, hasty type speech. I think it all came down pretty quickly from what I can see here. Then the third house lords is full eclipsed moon in Purva Bhadrapada. End of public support, hospitality. Also, this could be siblings. Yeah. So again, not just the police commissioner, but potentially us, all of us, on some level. Fourth house lord is a Sunday, unstable Saturn, Sun, sorry, in Uttara Falguni. Again, enjoyment with a purpose. It will be Swa through parivartana, exchange of houses. Mercury is there aspecting Saturn. So again, this challenge to authority, this massive Saturn lined up with this massive Sun. It can also be um, trouble with education, which is represented by fourth house. Um, it's kind of more of like a problem with ideas or theories and that sort of thing, because Mercury is an analytical planet and Saturn is in a fixed air sign. So a lot of ideas, ideology here. So end of positive thoughts, communication, good times, end of the party again is what I'm seeing. The fifth house here, fifth house lord is Mercury. Swa through parivartana. The other thing is Mercury has gone 12 houses away from Virgo. So there's losses here in this fifth house. Represented in this fifth house. There's Sun and K2. K2 again is in Hasta. A debilitated Sunday Venus and Chitra, aspected by Mars. And again, Mars has an exact aspect on K2. Also aspects of Jupiter, Moon, Mercury. So again, physical separation, sudden, unexpected legal issues, because Mars and Jupiter together is like fighting through words and law, justice, contracts, end of contracts, because you have Mars, Jupiter, and Mercury together, so that can be like contracts. You also have Mars, Mercury, and K2, which can be like technology. So this might also be like computer glitches, for example, or like I was talking about, like I took my electronics to the recycling place to, do whatever they do with them. Hopefully, not dump them, in some landfill. Also, not, I would say not being well advised, because this Venus worldly advisor is pretty challenged here, being debilitated and Sunday. So again, I think there was some hasty decision here to take some action to gain control of the situation, as far as it could, be contained. Unstable authority, lack of social support, and also grace as well, because Moon and Venus, the two emotional planets, are, unstable. Mental emotional stress for sure. Losses through business communication. This is the Mercury gone 12 houses away. But again, protection of non-animate things because of this Mercury protecting Virgo, the house of Virgo is representing. So what that leaves is people. So who's related to the fifth house? Well, kids, advisors, romantic partners. But again, it just seemed like whatever enjoyment that's been had by Mercury and Sun, the party is now over. Yeah. Computers, I mentioned. Women also, Venus and Moon and Rahu are the three female, energy planets. Kids. Also like hidden structure of authority relationships. So this could be like, because sometimes what happens with eclipses is sometimes things get covered up. Sometimes it's also like it's like the veil parts and you get to see the real deal behind the curtain. So this could be like a hidden structure of authority relationships, like maybe like with this whole New York police thing. They're going to start to investigate, who's related, who's involved here. Like apparently, I think the deputy mayor of the city is also under scrutiny, and so now there's like whatever pressure on the mayor to do more or say more or do more. And again, there are no formal charges, but everybody's just sort of like covering themselves, like best they can, to try to control this, contain this, mess that seems to be blowing up. Also, public relations, I would say. So again, this like decision by the police commissioner to step down, apparently in their statement, it was about they wanted to not be a distraction from the true work at the police department. So that's why they were willing to step down after serving the department for 30 years. You know, uh, who knows, right? So, and then again, there is this spiritual piece here, the meditation with Mercury being its own sign. Then the sixth house lord is this unstable Venus, which also has gone 12 houses away. So again, loss through enemies and also loved ones. So even if the brother wasn't actually a fixer or whatever, um, it's sort of a moot point because it's like just somehow somebody getting enough information to think about it, to think there might be a possibility. Now, his brother, who was like the top dog in the police department, New York Police Department, is like gone after 30 years. I mean, they dedicated themselves to 30 years, so that's all over. So yeah, what else do we have? So the seventh house here, seventh house lord is Mars, which has gone 6 houses away. So a lot of these planets have gone 6, 8, 12 houses away. And 6, 8, 12 houses are the Dushtana, the houses of suffering. So, it seems like here everything's in a positive house. However, when you see like where they've gone from their own house of ownership, then it's like, oh, we got another layer to look at. So the seventh house, the dispositor is Mars. It's aspected by Saturn and Jupiter. So you have this like mixed bag here of thoughts and emotions because Saturn's a great uh, malefic and Jupiter's a great benefic. Saturn's super strong though, so it's going to trump whatever Jupiter brings, the kind of optimism or that Jupiter brings. So, but with Mars going 8 houses away, there's going to be chronic issues here to the seventh house. And again, the seventh house represents things like partner, like spouse like partner, partnerships in general, also independent business. So there can be an end of or losses through partnerships. And again, a lot of mixed thoughts and emotions here. The eighth house lord is Jupiter. Jupiter's gone 6 houses away, so acute issues to the eighth house. And it's also aspected by Mars and Ardra, so that's going to be a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, seeking answers to acute problems, a whirlwind in the mind, because the eighth house represents deep psychology. Then the ninth house lord is Saturn, this massive Saturn aspected by Mars, where it's exalted. So it's going to be very strong Mars. So again, that could be your police department or military, some kind of physical force. Also leadership as well. Jupiter aspects here as well, but Jupiter's debilitated. So this is going to be more um, kind of spontaneous or impulsive, controlling of the situation that may not be the most compassionate or the most just. It might just be like, we got to stamp this all down before it really blows up and gets worse, because this is creating, I'm sure, a headache for the police department and the mayor's office and whoever else is involved. I don't even know. So government taking sudden action, lacking compassion and balance, because again, compassion or balance are Jupiter, but Jupiter is debilitated here in Capricorn. And again, legal issues with Mars and Jupiter there. So for the ninth house is like government, authority. For individuals, it's father or guru. So then the 10th house here, 10th house lords is massive Saturn. It's aspected by Mercury and Sun through the parivartana. So the Saturn is in Purva Bhadrapada. So there's this crack in the fixed ideology, long-term ideology here. That's part of the day-to-day activity. Yeah. This could be difficult news because of Saturn's, not happy-go-lucky planet by any means. And then you have Mercury here, which can be, again, news, communication, and also the daily activities of the government, because the Saturn is the lord of the 10th house. So the 10th house lord has gone to the ninth house lord has gone to the 10th house. So, the government's doing what it can to keep this all from going, like blowing up more than it already has. The 11th house lord is Jupiter. Rahu here in Uttara Bhadrapada. So again, that detached, destructive energy with the moon. And we've got aspects of Sun, Venus, Mercury. So ambition to release groups, public. There's mixed emotions here. So there's like a stepping back of that. Stepping back also of potentially income, like this police commissioner. It's true for him. Uh, lack of clarity because Rahu's there. It's going to skew, uh, the emotions, because Moon and Venus are involved there, and then Moon and Mercury, the mental planets, are there. So this could also mean a double hidden, unusual stream of income. because it's a dual sign, and the 11th house represents income. So this could be, there could be something here. Again, I'm not looking at the police commissioner specifically, but there's a story here, this seam. This could also be like drug use, especially when you see Rahu, Moon. You have the two mind planets, Mercury and Moon, on the Rahu Ketu axis. So Rahu and Ketu by themselves symbolize mental health issues. And then when you get Mercury and Moon involved, it's like, wow, very much amplified. Okay. And again, as I mentioned, this kind of configuration over the 5-11 axis reminds me of the concert hall attack that happened in Moscow not too long ago. And I have a video on that if you want to see that. Then the 12th house lord is Mars. It's aspected by a debilitated Saturn. So loss to and of authority. That's what I'm saying here. Okay. So let's look at the amshas or subdivisional charts to get a little bit more info. Okay, so let's look at relationships. So again, these subcharts, subzodiacs, amshas, divisional charts, they're mostly looked at, analyzed to determine timing of things, like when things are going to get a little more positive or a little bit more negative. The planets listed here are the Dasha period planets, and I've circled the ones for these Dasha period shifts. So if you watch those, you'll see when they're negative houses or not. So when they're negative houses, usually things go south. A little bit more negative. When they're positive houses, that can mean that usually it means that they're okay. It doesn't always mean that they're super great. It, depends on how strong they are and what's going on with them and stuff like that. But these usually are not analyzed in and of themselves by themselves. You always kind of take this information, integrate it with the natal chart. So just FYI. So we're going to start with the relationships here. These two charts here on this slide are the Navamsha D9 for spouse and partnerships, and the second was a Drake and a D3 for siblings. So again, in the main chart, we were seeing problems, right? Okay, so this first chart, all the grahas are well placed. They're all in positive houses. That's kind of nice. There are two parivartanas going on here. So Mercury and Venus and Saturn and Mars. So Saturn and Mars, that's going to be a lot of hardcore energy because they're both malefic planets and they both have special aspects. So they don't just aspect one across, but they have a couple special aspects. So you're going to have Mars and Saturn energy all over this chart. That's going to be a pretty heavy duty situation. Then you have Mercury and Venus all over the chart. So Mercury against communication, business, spouse. So spouse here, again, even though they're doing okay, it's not without issue for sure. Okay. Now Saturn's debilitated, okay, with Ketu in the 10th house. This can be like a stepping back from daily activities, which we are essentially seeing in the main chart. Okay. And the Saturn's aspect is aspecting the sun, which, it's basically doing the main chart as well through parivartana. And Saturn is on Mercury and Rahu and on the Rahu Ketu axis. So, disturbances of homework, mind partnerships. Now watch. So remember in the main chart, we had Saturn, this massive Saturn aspecting Mercury. As we go through, I'm just going to, give you, give you the, whatever the heads up now. Every single subchart I looked at, Saturn and Mercury were up against each other. Every single one. I've never seen that in any analysis I've ever done. Okay. So, that's a lot of destruction of all the things Mercury represents. So communication, friendship, business, analysis, logic, it's yeah, it's a lot. Okay, especially when you see it like it was kind of crazy. So anyway, Mars has a mutual aspect with Jupiter in the Lugna. Let me see. Mutual aspect Jupiter. Oh, and Mars aspects the Lugna through when it does a parivartana with Saturn. So a lot of anger here, angry mind, angry speech, legal issues, So the spouse is not, is going to get, again, the police commissioner's spouse is going to, relationships, partners, it doesn't have to be spouse, but partners are going to get investigated as well. The other thing that's kind of crazy in this subchart of D9 is how many soul enemy combinations we have. We have Mars with Ketu. That's a soul enemy relationship. We have Mars with Mercury. That's another one. Saturn, Sun, and Venus. Right? There's 4 soul enemies. This is a mess. A lot of conflict. A lot of heavy duty energy. Luckily, the moon is in its own house in the Lugna here, so there's probably some strength. But yeah, it's not enough, I think, to make this an easy situation. Then the Drake and a D3, siblings, all the grahas are well placed. They're all in Kendras. So Jupiter and Mercury, the 2 news planets, the 2 communication planets. Rahu is unusual. Saturn is like, again, delays, obstacles, chronic issues. Saturn is exalted here, very strong. Jupiter is debilitated. Mars is aspecting the Lugna where it's going to be exalted. So, unusual and difficult news or communication here regarding siblings, and again, unusual legal issues with this Jupiter debilitated K2 and an exalted Mars in the Lugna. What else do we have? Exalted Saturn, debilitated. Oh, so this exalted Saturn is aspecting the 4th house where it's debilitated. Mercury's there. And then Mars is aspecting, so Mars is going to be swathed there. So there's this like Saturn, Mercury, Mars combination on the 4-10 axis. This is like, again, military and engineering. Yeah. So, and this can be like a lot of like a detachment as well. The Saturn is kind of an isolationist planet as well as Mercury, and then you've got this unusual Rahu. And Jupiter's debilitated. So I think, again, a sibling, not just the police commissioner's sibling, but siblings in general, it's like whatever kind of difficulty they're going through, I think they're very detached, maybe even a little bit cold, like more an engineering military mind, trying to get through it, whatever the difficult situation is. Okay, so now we have other relationships. We have the Saptamsha D7 for children, and the Dwadashamsha D12 for parents, grandparents. So, because the 5th house was so challenged, I would assume this D7 would be as well. And so we can see that here, actually. Rahu and Saturn not well placed. The other thing is there's a Balarishta here, yoga here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 9 planets in negative houses. Balarishta yoga, when you have that many planets in negative houses, it indicates difficulties in childhood. That's what we're seeing in the main chart. Also, we have Jupiter with K2 Rahu on the 2-8 axis, so that can be like unusual speech, unusual thoughts, like a lot of confusion. And then again, we have Saturn with in mutual aspect with Mercury. So unusual thoughts, speech, difficulties here. Dwadashamsa D12 for parents, grandparents. Jupiter, Rahu are not well placed. Mercury and Saturn again up against each other on the 4-10 axis, so difficulties at home and at work. Daily activities, difficult decisions regarding all this. And again, unusual speech, thoughts and speech, because we have Venus with K2 and Rahu on the 2-8 axis here as well. So, this is stirring things up for members of family and close people. Again, whether you're the police commissioner or whether you're dealing with some other situation here. Looks like it's filtering out because that again in the natal chart, right? We have Mars and Ardra. That's not going to be a stable energy. And then that the lord of that house is at Mercury, which is challenged by this super strong Saturn. So difficulties with family and inner circle seems we're seeing here on these levels as well. Then education and career. We have Siddhamsha D24, education at the top, and the Dishamsha D10 for career below. Rahu is not well placed in either chart. This education chart seems to be important because we have 5 planets aspecting the lugna, that generally means that chart is important. What we can see here, Jupiter's aspecting its own sign, the lugna, which will bring some strength and support, but Saturn again is with Mercury. So Saturn is going to be, creating obstacles and delays. There's probably some endurance here, like it looks like somebody can overcome things, but there's going to be both short and long-term problems here with education. The Shamsha here, D10. Again, we have Jupiter, Ketu, Saturn, and Rahu on the 2-8 axis here. Unusual speech and thoughts, weird stuff going on at the work, career. There's also not just like Saturn and Mercury are not in a mutual aspect, but they are through parivartana. There's an exchange of houses between Saturn and Mercury. So again, difficult. Saturn and Mercury are going to be all over this chart. Like distance is what I'm seeing here. Isolation, distance at work, difficult speech communication going on. Then we have different wealth amshas, sub-zodiac. So at the top, root amsha D11 for income, and then the chaturashamsha D4 for assets. In the D11, all grahas well placed, but most are in dual signs, which again can indicate doubling up here, like we were seeing in the was it the main chart, and then also conflict. Is this like which way do we go? We have Saturn with Mercury again. So far, this is like number 8 of all the charts we looked at, and we'll just keep going. You'll see Mercury and Saturn like basically in this configuration through all the charts, which is pretty wild. At least there's some, strength here with Mercury in its own sign, but again, a very detached energy I'm seeing here. And you can see Jupiter's exalted in the 11th house, so looks like income will not be as affected as, again, relationships will be. The Chaturashamsha D4 for assets. Rahu's not well placed, but it's in parivartana with Mercury. So there's going to be like hidden, unusual thoughts, business communications going on here. So, again, if there's an investigation going on, they're going to have to dig pretty deep, I think. Mars and Sun are in the 11th house. So authorities, these are leadership planets in groups as income, potentially, but we're not running these planets. So again, I think it's mostly this disturbance of the mind, disturbance of communication, and then just squashing, education and communication. Frankly, the Saturn is like it might be squashing the truth, frankly. Because again, Jupiter is the truth, Mercury should be straightforward. So these things that Jupiter and Mercury represent are challenged, Then we have here, these are the health amshas. So the top here is the Tajik Shashtamsha D6 for acute issues. And in the middle, Tajik Ashtamamsha D8 for chronic issues. Then the Bamsha D27 for strength and resilience. So on the top one here, all grahas are well placed. In the 7th house here, we have Saturn, Mercury in a house where Sun is debilitated as a expositor here. So again, I was seeing difficulties with partners, independent business, because again, business is represented by Mercury. So yeah, probably. So again, probably okay, but not super great. I mean, at least Jupiter seems pretty good. I mean, Jupiter is Swan, it's with Venus where it's exalted, so communication and family and stuff like that, inner circle, probably okay. Again, it seems like more like spouse business partnerships, like kind of more lateral relationships are in trouble right now. It's challenged, but not, again, okay, you know, like limping along maybe. Then the second chart here, this is important. It's a Vargoda Malugna, so it's the same rising sign as the main chart, so that means this chart is important. And we can see Saturn and Mercury again together at the top here. Jupiter's not well placed, but it's exalted. And we have this Saturn, aspecting Jupiter. So Saturn again is squashing Jupiter and Mercury here. So communication, news, again, there's some like containment here of what's really going on under the hood, what the real story is. And again, this not well placed Jupiter is in the third house of siblings, and then the Saturn, Mercury, Rahu is on the 1-7 axis, so self and again partners. And you could see all these malefics here, like we have Saturn, Mercury, Mars, Rahu, Ketu on the 1-7 axis. This is going to be a problem with siblings, partners, independent business again, chronically. So again, it might be, okay, and maybe again, the leak here, potentially is through siblings at this moment in time, but um, you can see that there's like, pretty serious long-term issues here going on. Although Mars is this, swa here, so there's some strength. There is some strength in the seventh house, but with all these malefics, um, it's still going to be a more tamasic type of venture. It's not going to be a sattvic type venture. So again, sattvic is more kind of spiritual, and tamasic is more like a seedy, a shady business type stuff. Yeah. So again, I'm sure there's other stuff going on. I'm sure it's not all, you know, sunshine and unicorns going on, at least in the New York administration, police commissioner, mayor's office, or what have you. Then the Bombshell D27, this is for strength and resilience generally. So Saturn's not well placed and debilitated, so that's not great. The other thing is it's the dispositor, or the owner of the chart, so it's the Lugnatia. So this debilitated and negatively placed, negative house placed Saturn is going to drag down strength and resilience. So what I'm seeing here is that, again, we were already seeing this is not going to turn around quickly. Probably going to last, whatever comes out of this moment in time is probably going to rule out for the next, 6 to 8 months at least. And this is going to probably take a toll. We have this debilitated Saturn aspecting Jupiter, which again is spirit. That's going to drag down spirit. We have Saturn aspecting Mercury, again, the mind. We have parivartana between Venus and Mercury here. So we have Saturn on Mercury, Mars, and Venus. And we have Saturn aspecting the 12th house of losses. But again, Saturn is aspecting its own sign. So we're not talking about like really physical losses. Like, it's not so much like assets, I don't think, but it's a lot of relationships here, like children, friends, loved ones, siblings. Saturn is on all these planets here. So yeah, it's taking a toll, whatever the situation is. Then the last slide here, we have the spirituality and worship chart. So Panchamsha D5 for innate spirituality, and the Vimshamsha D20 for more formal worship. So the first chart, all grahas are well placed. Jupiter is debilitated. The 10th house here of daily activity and work. What I'm seeing here, Mercury is aspecting its own sign. Venus is there debilitated, and Saturn is there again. Mercury, Saturn again. And again, since we're looking at Mercury and Saturn as they're active, what I'm seeing here is that, like, the person, like, if this was a particular person's chart that we're looking at, their they bring their spirituality to their daily work, whatever their 9 to 5 job is. That's their spiritual practice. Okay. We also have Mars, Swa here. We're not running Mars, but Mars is in its own sign in the 5th house. This is like innovative counsel. And the thing is, this Jupiter, even though it's debilitated in the 2nd house, it's aspecting the sun. It's aspecting also this 10th house, and it's aspecting and exalted in the 8th house of deep psychology. So again, even if somebody isn't, what I'm saying, explicit about their faith and spiritual religious ideas, it seems like for a person, again, if this was a specific person's chart, they're bringing that spirituality through their deep psychology into the things that they do every day. And that's why they probably lead in a different way. Because again, if they're following spirit instead of the material world, and again, that seemed to be the message here, right? It's like all that glitters is not gold. Like if you chase what you think is, the material goodies of the world, a lot of times they become mirages, or they slip from your fingers, or they suddenly, blow up. And it's like, well, what's really important in life, Um, So it seems like, again, for this person, they're it's maintaining their faith in difficult circumstances and thinking and speaking um, with faith, maybe more to themselves than to others, like, not necessarily preaching and proselytizing or whatever, but just, especially during dark circumstances. That's almost like a superpower. It's easy to, have faith and, oh yeah, things are going to work out great when everything is working well, at least the way you hoped it would. But when things don't go the way you have planned, then it becomes more difficult. Then the Vim Shamshahir G20 for formal worship. So Mercury and Rahu are not well placed, and Mercury and Saturn are not opposing each other, but you can see we have a massive Saturn in its own sign retrograde in the Lagna, and Mercury is in a sign of Saturn. So Mercury is dominated by Saturn. So again, in a different way, Saturn is squashing Mercury. Kind of thing Mercury represents. Mars Swa in the 10th house. So again, and Saturn aspects here as well, and Jupiter as well. So this kind of engineering of of law and legal structures is important. Again, leadership at work here. The Swan retrograde Saturn in the Lugna. I mean, this is a very when you see something like this is somebody who is like just a devoted servant, like a humble, devoted servant who has like unwavering ideology and perseverance. Like this is somebody who's not just like, talking the talk, but walking the walk in a very humble, dedicated way. And despite whatever craziness is swirling around them, it does not get swayed from their faith, is what I'm seeing here. Yeah, so seeing here, oh, Saturn is aspecting the third house where it's debilitated. So again, problems potentially with siblings. This Mercury, it might indicate like a time of retreat, potentially. But I was just seeing more of the same stuff that I was seeing in the natal chart, where it's just like, this humble servant. Even that's what I was getting. I mean, again, I don't know much about the NYPD Police Commissioner, but it seemed like there was enough references to him being a fairly religious person or spiritual person or something. And if that's true, which maybe that's what got him through 3 years of service with NYPD, because that ain't easy. But especially when you see that much, especially when you see that much of probably the best of people and worst of people at the same time with the different strange circumstances that come up. Maybe the only thing that kind of keeps you sane and is focused and surviving in that whole environment is to have faith, in something higher than yourself and not be so attached to, all the gold, laden goodies that seem to be pop up, when they come up, not to get distracted by all that. And all of this seemed to bring me back. It reminded me of the Diamond Sutra. I don't know if you've heard about that, but it comes more from like a Buddhist tradition. But in the Diamond Sutra, there's kind of a different, there's like a list of activities and outcomes. So this is all based on karma. And so, for example, if your boss is yelling at you, then what that means is like you could yell back at your boss or you could internalize it and then go yell at somebody else, around the corner or whatever. But if you see all of this as like just karma playing itself out and not taking it personally, then when the boss yells at you, you're like, oh, well, the boss is yelling at me because I have some karma in my past, this life, another life, who knows, where maybe I did something to create that karma of my boss yelling at me. So how do you switch that? So what's also nice about the Diamond Sutra is it tells you like what caused the karma and so if you know what caused the karma, you can stop creating that karma again. So the karma for something like your boss yelling at you is that, you probably yelled at somebody, or at least in your mind. Maybe you didn't, the words didn't come out of your mouth, but maybe in your mind you're like, oh, this guy's a jerk or whatever. Um, so if you're able to, and this is a deep spiritual practice and quite a hard practice it can be. So when the boss is yelling at you, if you can, take it in, filter out the constructive feedback and, let the rest go. And instead of getting upset or, in your mind, or maybe actually yelling at your boss or getting revenge on your boss or whatever, if you're actually wishing your boss well, that's when you can start to change that cycle around, that karmic cycle around. Yeah. So anyway, and it just seemed like this chart, again, it seems like a lot's going down here, but when I saw that K2 aspecting Jupiter in the Lugna, I think the real attraction here, again, we started with, the fixed earth sign of Taurus and Rohini, the most attractive, nakshatra lunar mansion. But once things shift and Mercury goes into Virgo and K2 aspects into the Lugna, I think the most attractive feature would potentially be somebody's deep, sensitive, spirituality. And again, that superhuman power of being able to stay focused on the spiritual level of things rather than get caught up in all the, stuff that comes and goes in the material world. Um, yeah, so again, it just to, and then again, with this chart, it was just kind of crazy, the Saturn Mercury relationship, but very strong, very hardcore. But again, maybe that's what's really needed is that, again, just take a step back from, it's like, what is that phrase, not my circus, not my monkeys. I mean, the circus and the monkeys are there, but it's like, do you let the circus and the monkeys, upset your internal balance, that sort of thing. So there you go. All right. So thank you everybody for stopping by, listening to one of my talks. Thanks for all your support for my work and the channel. All the likes and subscribes and comments, donations, it's all very much appreciated, that people are, enjoying my videos and getting, something positive out of my videos. That really means a lot to me. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. And then if you're looking again for more famous birth charts to learn from, check out my birth charts archive list 2024 video for a list of all the birth charts I've analyzed on the channel. I do offer individual birth chart readings live on Zoom and as recorded video. I will not be doing them during the eclipses, though. That's not really a great time to get a reading done because there's too much chaotic energy going on. But, probably starting, what is it, after the solar eclipse, October 2nd. So after that, so maybe like mid-October, personal readings will start up again. If that's ever of interest to you, whenever spirit calls you to something like that, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info. I do have another YouTube channel, Natural Medicine, where I talk about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, and yoga, so other Vedic arts, as well as other paradigms of medicine like homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. And the name of that channel is Nature Source Care. All right, so as always, thank you for your time. And I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so take good care, and until the next one, namaste.